Zooey Mama, how's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of Buy or Bust. Today we are looking at the first card coming in spotlights for this June season in Marvel Snap. We are talking about Thena, going to be in spotlights starting June 4th alongside Grandmaster and MODOK. Now, if you're confused by MODOK, it's because the data mines previously had Thena in spotlights with Grandmaster and Gladiator, and MODOK being in a later week alongside X-23. Those have swapped. They're now showing MODOK in the spotlights this first week, and that's why data mines are unofficial. Thena is a 2-cost, 1-power card with the ability that after each turn, she gets plus 3 power if you played exactly 2 cards that turn. And she's a 2-1. She's pretty similar to Angela. She's even this lady with kind of long hair holding a weapon. I mean, kind of reminds you of Angela, right? She's a 2-cost card that just powers up over time, but with a bit of a different mechanic. And what's interesting is Thena does count herself, right? On turn 3, if you played Thena plus Kitty Pryde at the end of turn 3, Thena will get that plus 3 power, okay? Because it's looking at the end of each turn, so it can even count the turn that you play her, and getting plus 3 each time, you can ramp up pretty quickly. And just a small spoiler alert, I have Thena as the best card coming out this month in terms of competitive strength. I have Thena predicting that she's the strongest card this season. So let's get into her best synergies, the good, the bad, some deck ideas, and then I'll just give my final ratings on this Spotlight Week and Thena herself. So the card that I think Thena loves the most is Kitty Pryde, okay? And this is very similar to Angela. You love playing Kitty Pryde on Angela over and over to get Angela her extra power. But with Thena, Kitty makes it really flexible and easy to trigger her 2 cards requirement, okay? If your hand is empty or you only have 1 card in hand, you're only going to be playing 1 card a turn and you cannot power up Thena. But if you always have Kitty Pryde as an option that can fill up that second card spot for just 1 energy, that's going to be very nice and very convenient, okay? So you can use Kitty, yes, to keep triggering, powering up Kitty Pryde or powering up Angela, but you can also just use her as a flexible spot to be the second card or keep her in hand if you have 2 other cards you're going to play. Next up, Ravana. Thena's a 2-1, Angela's a 2-0. You put them with Ravana, they each cost 1, and again, Thena's not terrible coming down later in the game because she can power up on the turn she is played. And then lastly, Angela. I've been talking about Angela. They're very similar. They're both 2-cost cards, but I don't know if they compete with each other too much, and I'll get into this later, because they're so cheap, right? You can play both of them, and I think they like the same cards. They get powered up with the same cards and similar synergies. So I think they might just like each other. You could have Thena in one lane. She gets really big. You have Angela in a different lane. She can get really big, right? Just have these cheap cards that end up being powerhouses across the board. So let's look at the good and the bad for Thena, and we will start with the good. First up, she has a very, very high power ceiling. Okay, for a 2-cost card that can hit 10 or more power, that's high. Okay, that's incredible. She could win a lane even though she's only a 2-cost card, and I'll go more into this later. We already know that Angela's good. Okay, I've mentioned they're very similar. Angela is the closest comparison with Thena, and I think they like similar cards. I think they like similar decks. If we know Angela is good and Thena is very similar, potentially better because she can reach a higher power number, then it's almost guaranteed that Thena is also going to be good, okay? And possible that Thena is going to be great or amazing, right? It's nice having this comparison. I don't think Thena is that much of a wild card. I think we kind of know what we're in for, and it's looking pretty good. She can power up on the turn you play her, as I mentioned, so even Thena coming down on turn 6 could be a 2-4, and it's still decent if played late. But even you could have some shenanigans. Maybe turn 2 you play Thena with like a 0-cost card, and she gets powered up, or you had a location that gave you plus energy, and you were able to play her and power her up on turn 1 or 2. I mean, there's some ways that she can really get a boost from that. In terms of the bad, the negative aspects of Thena, first up, she's a 2-1, and like Angela, she's just going to get wrecked by Red Guardian, okay? If you play Angela, your opponent hits her with Red Guardian, you now just have a -2 power card that's not doing anything. If you play Thena and your opponent plays Red Guardian, you just have a -1 power card that's not doing anything, okay? And it wasn't on reveal, so it didn't do anything in the first place. It's just like this negative power on your side of the board. And she also does get wrecked by Shadow King. Okay, at times she may get hit by Shang-Chi if she gets really big and really powerful, but she's only a 2-cost card. Shang-Chi costs 4. That's not really a big worry. But Red Guardian, Shadow King are legitimate concerns. You do need to prioritize and decide at times, do you want to power up Athena by playing 2 cards? Or do you have actually just 1 card you want to play this turn, and that's the best play, right? You're going to be deciding, you know, on turn 6, do you want to play a 4-cost and a 2-cost, and that gives Thena a +3 more? Or do you just want to play like a 6-cost Red Hulk or Doctor Doom and skip out on the +3? Okay, at times you will have to choose to meet Thena's requirement or just make a different play that's maybe just 1 card or, you know, more than 2 cards. Maybe it's 3 or 4 that turn. Again, she may compete with Angela, but I think they're so cheap you actually want them together, and they actually indirectly synergize with each other because they like the same cards. But these type of decks do like taking up board space. Okay, you're playing a lot of cards. You're playing 2 cards every turn. If Kitty Pryde isn't one of those, then they're sitting on the board. They're not coming back to your hand. And so it's going to take up board space. Some locations, some decks your opponent might be playing could be limiting the amount of board space you have available. And here's just my friendly reminder to please give this video a like, give it that thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, because we cover all kinds of unreleased content here and every single new card coming to Marvel Snap. Now let's talk about Thena's floor and ceiling. Okay, Thena at her floor or her reasonable worst, I think you're just powering her up once. Okay, she's getting +3 power. Maybe you did get her out kind of early, but the rest of the turns you felt it was best to just play like 1 card that filled out the curve, or your draws were bad, or maybe you played Thena on turn 6 and you just went Thena plus like a 4-cost card, and so she just got that +3 at the end of turn 6, okay? The decks you're playing her in, I don't think she ever just doesn't power up at all, right? They're kind of built for cards like Thena. But I think there will be times where she does just power up once, and then she's a 2-4. That's viable. That's good power on the board. It's like really close to being competitive. Maybe a 2-5 would be already just competitive as is. I'd say it's just under that. But 2-4 at her reasonable worst, not too shabby. What about Thena at her best? Well, technically, if you had a 7-turn game, she could gain +15 power, assuming you're not also playing her alongside a 0-cost card on turn 2, which is even going to be more rare. You're powering her up on turns 3, 4, 5, 6. If there's a 7th turn, it's 7, so that'd be +5 power-ups. But more often than not, you're not going to be playing her in a deck with magic, so unless your opponent has magic, her max is going to be +12, and she'll be a 2-13. A 2-13 is crazy, right? 13 power would feel great on a 5-cost card. And now you're having 13 power on a 2-cost card? Yeah, that's above the line of being overpowered. Her ceiling, if you could hit her ceiling every game, if you find a deck, even just 6 turns, doesn't have magic, and you manage to draw her by turn 2 or turn 3 and hit her ceiling every game, that's completely OP. Okay, and again, you don't even have to play her on turn 2. You can play her on turn 3 alongside with a 1-cost card. And she still powers up on turns 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's 4 power-ups plus 12 power. Where is Thena on average? My guess is that she powers up about 3 times on average, okay? Because if you play her on turn 2, maybe you power up on turn 3, 4, and 5, and turn 6 you go with a 6-cost, you go with the Red Hulk, you go with the Doctor Doom, or whatever, okay? Or you just have 1 turn, you miss, you had to fill the energy, or your draws were bad, right? You're not going to have the perfect hand every time, or maybe you drew her a bit later, you didn't get her out until turn 4. But I think reasonably, she can get +9 power and be a 2-10. A 2-10 is still really good. 10 is great power for a 4-cost card, but she can be disabled. Again, Red Guardian feels bad, man. Shadow King feels bad, man. So I think she has good power. I'm not sure it's overpowered, although I think it's walking the line, okay? The speed at which she can gain power is pretty crazy. So that's where I think Thena falls on average. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. What power? She will often be at the end of the game. Is she going to get this +9? Does she get more or does she get less? And I'm kind of setting the bar too high for her. Let me know what you think, and let's get into the 3 decks I have built for Thena. So first up, I've got Thena in this Ravana lockdown deck. Now this deck is just pretty good. It already has Angela, and instead of replacing Angela, I decided to also put in Thena. Again, I think they like being in the same deck together because you just have so many options. I mean, look at the number of 2-cost cards in this deck, and that's okay because these cards are cheap. On turn 4, you can play 2 of them. Turn 5, you can play 1 of them with a 3-cost card. And we've got great targets for Ravana. She can obviously hit Angela, Thena, Goblin, Sage, even the Professor X. Getting those cards at a discount could help Thena. Maybe turn 5, you go with like a Kitty Pryde plus Professor X or something. I mean, it's just going to be so versatile, and it makes it more consistent, right? Sometimes you don't draw the Angela, maybe you draw the Thena. Sometimes you don't draw the Thena, but you have the Angela, okay? That redundancy might actually be very helpful, and I think this deck, it already works. It's going to keep working with Thena. Next up, I've got Thena in a Silky Smooth list, and of course we have Angela and Kitty Pryde here again, okay? I have Angela and Kitty Pryde in all my decks with Thena because I think it just makes sense, okay? I think it just works, especially the Kitty Pryde is so important. But it works here. I mean, this deck is often playing 2 cards a turn. You're trying to gain the boost of energy with Hope Summers. You're trying to gain the boost of power with Elsa. We don't have a big 6-cost card in here, so on turn 6, you're going to be looking to play 2 cards again, and that can move stuff over, help Craven, that's going to power up Thena. I mean, there's just so many ways. These kind of, not zoo, but fairly cheap, more mid-rangey decks love playing 2 cards a turn on average, and so it's just a nice spot for Thena to fit in. And lastly, I've got Thena in this Good Cards Darkhawk list. Now, I think Darkhawk is going to be really strong this season because later on we have Fastos coming out, which buffs up cards in your deck, and then we have Arishem, which just adds 12 cards to your deck. So if your opponent is playing one of those cards, putting rocks into their deck is really going to mess with Fastos, and the fact that they have a ton of cards in their deck with Arishem is really going to power up Darkhawk, okay? So I think it might be good to just get the early jump on Darkhawk and start playing him right now, even though he has seen his fair share of nerfs and more. But this deck often does play multiple cards a turn. Again, we have the Hope Summers. There's no 4-cost cards here. On turn 4, we're going to look to maybe play a Kitty Pryde plus a Nocturne, or a Korg plus a Rock Slide. We've even got Leech that we can blink, or we can blink on top of something else. And we've just got 1 6-cost card with Dr. Doom. So on turn 6, you can play the Doom, or you can play 2 smaller things and go to power up Thena. So to look at the Spotlight Week for June 4th to June 11th, as is currently shown in Datamines, again, it was originally showing Gladiator in place of MODOK, but he has swapped. He's going to be in a later week, it seems. In terms of token value for this week, it's good. Thena, obviously, Series 5. She's the new card. Grandmaster, also Series 5, 6,000 tokens. Recently got buffed to 2-2. Okay, not too shabby there. MODOK is only Series 4. Okay, old Season Pass card, but is now just Series 4, so it's okay token value. In terms of being competitive, yeah, I think it's just okay. Almost bad. I mean, I'm not really counting Thena here because we don't honestly know how she will perform. I'm confident she's going to do well, but we don't know exactly. Grandmaster, he did just get a buff, and he's okay. He's not bad. He sees a little bit of play, but he's pretty niche, and he doesn't really carry decks. He's just an option. Same thing with MODOK. Most discard decks do not run MODOK anymore. They just run some other options with Hela, and she brings a bunch of stuff back. But if discard does get nerfed, or maybe Hela gets nerfed, then maybe MODOK comes back into play a bit more, and he's the same thing. He's okay. You can play a MODOK discard, and it's decent. It's not bad, but it's pretty niche and kind of replaceable. So it's kind of weaker in terms of the competitive level of this Spotlight Cache. In terms of these variants, I think they're good. I like these variants. I think this Thena variant is really good. It might be my favorite, or at least one of my favorite Spotlight variants of this month for the new cards. The Grandmaster one is solid, and the MODOK one is solid. And I don't like a lot of the MODOK variants. He's got some kind of weird ones. but this one's pretty good. So I actually think it's a good week for the variants if you are interested in chasing after any of those. So now it's time to sum it all up with my final predictions and ratings for Thena. First up, in terms of being fun, I think she's okay. She is a stat stick, but she's a stat stick you have to work for, and it grows as the game goes on. Okay, this is more exciting than just a card like Sasquatch or Mockingbird, where you just slap down and that just sits there at its power and kind of does nothing, right? Angela, Thena, you're trying to do specific things for after you play them to power them up, and you can decide to power them up or not. That makes it a little bit more interesting. So she's okay in terms of fun. In terms of being flexible, I think she's good. Angela has good flexibility. Thena should as well, okay? She doesn't need as many, zoo cheap decks as Angela does. You could go with more mid-rangey. You just want to be playing 2 cards a turn for at least a couple turns. I mean, even if you just trigger her twice, she has 2/7, right? That's no joke. So even if you just have 2 turns after you play Thena where you play 2 cards, she still likes that. It's still good enough. So she is fairly flexible. The only thing she wouldn't like is decks that literally are just playing 1 card a turn, filling out the curve every single time. In terms of being competitive, I think she's good. Maybe she's amazing. I'm a bit hesitant to get the amazing rating coming off my rating for Sasquatch, who's a fine card, but not OP as I thought he would be. So for Thena, I do think she's going to be the strongest card coming out this month, and I'm not sure it's OP or if it's just really good, right? It's kind of hard. Where is that boundary? Is she going to be amazing or just really good? I think she could be amazing, but I'm going to be on the safe side. I'm going to say she's going to be really good, and then we'll wait until she comes out, and we'll see how she starts performing. But my rating and recommendation for Thena is to get her. I think this is a nice card to get. Yes, I think she's going to be good. I think she's going to be really strong. But more than that, she's so flexible. Imagine if you did not own Angela, right? Imagine how many decks you have made over however long you've been playing Snap that used Angela. The diversity of those decks, how they played, how they performed in the meta. Thena reminds me of that. Okay, Thena seems very similar. So just having her in your collection, I think could be extremely valuable. Whether you're playing her with Angela or not, whether you're playing the decks I showed here or some other decks, I think she's going to have a lot of options, a lot of homes in the metas as time go on. So, wait a couple days if you're concerned about her power or her fun, but I think she's going to be solid. She's going to be worth chasing after and picking up. So let me know what you guys think of Thena, what you think her best synergies, combos, and decks are. If I missed any that you think are just obvious and I should include, let me know in the comments down below. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.